Finding my wife in bed with the delivery driver at 6:12 a.m. was just the beginning of the worst week of my life. I wasn't supposed to be home. That's the thing about working the overnight shift at Midwest Distribution. Your schedule becomes unpredictable. When the main conveyor system seized up at 4 a.m. and maintenance said they needed at least 6 hours to fix it, my supervisor sent the whole crew home early. I didn't call Nicole. Why would I? I figured I'd just slip into bed beside her, maybe surprise her with breakfast later once I'd caught a few hours of sleep. The fast-track logistics truck parked in our driveway should have been my first warning sign. But my brain, foggy from 12 hours of loading freight, didn't register it. Maybe a neighbor got an early delivery. Maybe someone pulled over to check their phone. I was too tired to think straight. I unlocked the front door quietly, dropped my steel-toed boots by the mat, and padded down the hallway in my socks. The bedroom door was cracked open about 2 inches. I could hear sounds that didn't make sense. Nicole's voice, breathless, and a man's low murmur. My hand froze on the door handle. For maybe 3 seconds, I stood there like an idiot, my exhausted brain refusing to process what my ears were telling me. Then I pushed the door open. Derek Hale, 29 years old, driver for Fast Track Logistics, the guy who'd eaten barbecue at our 4th of July cookout 3 months ago, was in my bed. With my wife of 8 years. The sheets were tangled around them, and they were definitely not playing cards. They froze. Nicole's eyes went wide, her mouth forming a perfect O of shock. Derek scrambled for the sheets like a teenager caught by his parents, nearly falling off the mattress in the process. "Ray!" Nicole started, her voice cracking. "Get out!" My voice came out flat, dead. I didn't recognize it as my own. "Man, look, I can explain." Derek was already grabbing his pants from the floor, hopping on one foot as he tried to jam his leg through. I said, "Get out of my house." He dressed faster than I've ever seen anyone dress, fumbling with buttons, nearly tripping over his own shoes. Nicole sat up, pulling the comforter to her chest, tears already streaming down her face. Her mascara was running. She'd put on makeup. For him. At 6 in the morning. "Ray, please, it's not what you think." I actually laughed at that. It came out harsh and ugly. "Really?" "Because what I think is pretty straightforward, Nicole. Unless you're about to tell me he was helping you look for a lost contact lens." Derek pushed past me, muttering something that might have been an apology. I heard the front door slam, then his truck engine roaring to life. Through the bedroom window, I watched him back out of the driveway like the house was on fire. And that's when I noticed something that would change everything. His truck was loaded. Through the gap in the cargo door, he'd left it partially open in his rush to escape. I could see boxes. Dozens of them, stacked wrong. I've been a warehouse supervisor for 11 years. I know how freight gets loaded, how drivers organize their routes for efficiency. Those boxes weren't arranged for delivery. They were arranged for concealment. Smaller items hidden behind larger ones. The kind of stacking you do when you don't want someone to see what's really in the truck. "How long?" I asked, still watching the truck disappear down the street. "Ray, please sit down. Let me explain." "How long?" Nicole wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing mascara across her cheek. 4 months. 4 months. I repeated the words like they were in a foreign language. "Since August?" "It started at the company picnic. You remember, you couldn't come because of the overtime. So this is my fault? Because I was working? That's not what I'm saying." She swung her legs over the side of the bed, still clutching the comforter to her chest. I'm trying to explain how it happened. I don't want an explanation. I want to know how you could look me in the face every single day for 4 months while you were... I couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't make my mouth form the words. I wanted to tell you. So many times I almost... But you didn't. You kept lying. You kept coming home to me, eating dinner with me, sleeping in this bed. I gestured at the rumpled sheets, the pillow that still had the indent of Derek's head. Our bed. And the whole time you were planning the next time you could get him over here. Nicole was crying harder now, her shoulders shaking. Part of me wanted to comfort her. Old habits die hard. But a bigger part of me wanted to put my fist through the wall. Was it worth it? I asked. Was he worth blowing up everything we built? She didn't answer. She just kept crying. That's what I thought. 4 months. The same period when our emergency fund had mysteriously drained from $12,000 to nothing. Nicole had told me it was her mother's medical bills, some complications from her hip surgery. I'd believed her because why wouldn't I believe my wife? The money, I said slowly, the pieces clicking together. The emergency fund? That was for him? She nodded, fresh tears spilling. He had gambling debts, Ray. Bad people were threatening him. You couldn't just let your boyfriend get hurt. I turned to face her fully. Is that what you were going to say? It wasn't like that. It started as me trying to help a friend, and then things just happened. Things don't just happen, Nicole. You made choices. Every single day for 4 months, you made choices. I walked out of the room. I couldn't look at her anymore, couldn't breathe the same air. I grabbed my keys from the counter and left without another word. I drove for 2 hours without a destination. Just movement, just the road, just anything that wasn't that bedroom. I ended up at a truck stop outside Lee's Summit, drinking coffee that tasted like it had been brewed sometime during the Reagan administration, staring at a parking lot full of 18-wheelers. The waitress, a tired woman in her 50s with a name tag that said Deb, kept refilling my cup without asking. On her third pass, she paused. Honey, you look like someone ran over your dog and then backed up to finish the job. Something like that. Woman trouble? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. How'd you know? I've been working graveyard shift for 23 years. I've seen every kind of heartbreak there is. She topped off my coffee. Whatever she did, it ain't worth destroying yourself over. Trust me. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Kitchen's got pancakes if you want. Carbs help with the pain. Not a lot, but some. Thanks, maybe later. She moved on to the next customer, and I went back to staring at my phone. That's when my brain started working again, not on the affair, but on those boxes. I pulled out my phone and opened the Fast Track Logistics app. Every major warehouse supervisor has access to it. We use it to track incoming shipments, coordinate schedules, flag delays. Derek's route was supposed to be a standard residential delivery circuit. Kitchen appliances, furniture, the usual suburban stuff. But his truck's GPS showed he'd been at our house for 47 minutes. No delivery scheduled. And before that, he'd made a stop at an address in Independence that wasn't on his manifest at all. Professional instinct kicked in, cutting through the emotional wreckage. Something was wrong here. Something bigger than my wife sleeping around. I started pulling up more data, Derek's delivery confirmations for the past month, his route deviations, his timing gaps. The more I looked, the worse it got. 3 weeks ago, he'd signed off on delivering a shipment of premium electronics to an address in Raytown. I knew that address. It was a vacant lot. I'd driven past it 100 times on my way to my sister's house. There was no building there, hadn't been for years. Yet according to the system, Derek had successfully delivered $4,000 worth of merchandise to a pile of dirt and weeds. I didn't go home that night. I checked into a motel off I-70, the kind of place that charges by the hour and doesn't ask questions, and spent the hours until dawn, cross-referencing shipping manifest with delivery confirmations. The coffee maker in the room didn't work. I didn't care. I was running on adrenaline and fury. What I found made me forget about the affair entirely. Derek Hale had been making special deliveries for 8 months. According to his GPS logs, he routinely deviated from his assigned routes, stopping at locations that never appeared in the fast-track system. Warehouses in industrial parks, storage units on the outskirts of town, private residences in neighborhoods where nobody orders flat-screen TVs and pharmaceutical shipments. But here's what really caught my attention. Some of those missing shipments originated from Midwest distribution. My warehouse, my responsibility. Crates of electronics, pallets of baby formula, cases of prescription medication, all marked as delivered in the system. But I knew half those addresses were garbage. I'd flagged some of them myself over the past few months, assuming they were clerical errors, typos in the database. They weren't errors. At 7 a.m., I called Jake Martinez. Jake ran security at Midwest, a former military police officer who treated inventory discrepancies like personal insults. If anyone would understand what I was looking at, it was him. "Ray, you sound like hell. Everything okay? I need you to meet me, not at work, somewhere private." This about the missing Simmons order from last week? It's about a lot more than that. We met at a diner near the Truman Sports Complex, one of those places with sticky vinyl booths and waitresses who call everyone Han. Jake was already there when I arrived, his security badge hanging from a lanyard around his neck, a tablet open in front of him. He was nursing a cup of black coffee and working on a plate of hash browns. "You look like you haven't slept," he said, sliding a cup of coffee across the table. "I haven't." I slid into the seat across from him, feeling the vinyl creak under my weight. "I haven't eaten either. Can't stomach the thought of food right now." "That bad, huh?" Jake leaned back, studying my face. "This isn't just about work, is it? It's about everything." I pulled out my phone. "But let's start with work. How many inventory discrepancies have we logged in the past 8 months? Jake's eyebrows rose. "Off the top of my head? 30, maybe 40 incidents. Corporate says it's within acceptable shrinkage rates." "It's not shrinkage, it's theft." I showed him my phone screen. "This is Derek Hale's GPS data. Fast track driver. Look at his route deviations." Jake set down his fork and took the phone, scrolling through the data. His expression shifted from curiosity to concern to something darker. These don't match his delivery schedule at all. Some of these stops are in the middle of nowhere. Industrial parks, storage facilities. No, they don't. And look at this. I reached over and swiped to another screen. Cross-reference his off-route stops with our missing inventory reports. The dates match. Every single time we log a discrepancy, Derek's been making an unauthorized stop somewhere in the metro area. Son of a... Jake pushed his plate away, his appetite apparently gone too. "You're telling me a fast-track driver has been stealing from us? For 8 months? I'm telling you it's worse than that." I took a breath. "You know Nicole works in logistics coordination at Fast Track, right?" "Yeah, I've met her a couple times. Nice lady, good at her job. She has access to shipping routes, delivery schedules, high-value cargo manifests, the kind of information you'd need if you wanted to intercept specific shipments without triggering any alarms. Jake was staring at me now, pieces clicking together behind his eyes. Ray, what happened this morning? Why haven't you slept? I told him. All of it. The truck in the driveway, coming home early, walking into the bedroom, the whole ugly mess. When I finished, Jake was silent for a long moment. He picked up his coffee, took a sip, set it down. So you're thinking, what? That Nicole isn't just having an affair? That she's helping this guy steal cargo? I'm thinking my wife might be running the whole operation. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I went back to the house when I knew Nicole would be at work. I needed evidence, something concrete, something that would prove whether I was losing my mind or whether my wife had betrayed me in ways far worse than adultery. Her laptop was on the kitchen table, right where she always left it. Password protected, but she'd used the same password for everything since we first started dating. The name of her childhood dog plus her mother's birthday. I was in within seconds. What I found made my stomach turn. Emails. Hundreds of them. Coded language about packages and special handling and priority routing. Spreadsheets tracking shipment values, driver schedules, warehouse security rotations, and photos. Dozens of photos of security protocols, loading dock layouts, and employee ID badges, including mine. Nicole had photographed my employee credentials, my badge, my access codes. She'd been using my information to enter restricted areas of the warehouse after hours, areas I was responsible for, areas where the highest value cargo was stored. I copied everything to a flash drive. Then I sat in our living room, the room where we'd opened Christmas presents together, where we'd talked about having kids someday, where we'd built what I thought was a life, and waited for her to come home. The afternoon sun crept across the carpet. I watched it move, marking time. An hour. 2 hours. I didn't move from the couch, didn't eat, didn't turn on the TV. Just sat there, holding that flash drive, thinking about everything I thought I knew about my marriage. 8 years. 8 years of cooking dinner together, of lazy Sunday mornings, of planning vacations we'd never take because money was always tight. 8 years of I love you at the end of phone calls, of falling asleep with her head on my shoulder, of believing we were building something real. All of it a lie. She walked in at 6:15 p.m., still in her work clothes, her face puffy from crying. When she saw me sitting on the couch, she stopped cold in the doorway. Ray, I've been trying to call you all day. I know. I held up the flash drive. We need to talk about something other than Derek. Her eyes fixed on the drive. I watched the color drain from her face, watched her fingers tighten on her purse strap, watched the realization hit her like a physical blow. What is that? Your laptop, the spreadsheets, the emails to someone named VT about priority shipments. I stood up. You want to tell me what's really going on? Or should I just take this to Jake Martinez right now? Nicole's legs buckled. She caught herself on the back of a chair, breathing hard, her knuckles white against the upholstery. Ray, you don't understand. Then explain it to me. I can't. You can't, or you won't. She looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not guilt, not shame, terror. If I tell you, they'll kill me. They'll kill both of us. I felt the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. Who's they? Please. She crossed to me, grabbed my hands. Her fingers were ice cold, trembling. Ray, I know what I did was wrong. The affair, the lying, the money, I know. But what I'm involved in now, it's so much bigger than that. You have to believe me. Bigger how? Vincent Torres. She whispered the name like saying it too loud might summon him. He runs the whole thing. Warehouses across 5 states. Drivers, logistics coordinators, warehouse workers. He has people everywhere. When Derek started having money problems, gambling debts to some very dangerous people, Vincent offered to help him out. But the price was running shipments, stealing cargo, and Derek needed someone on the inside to make it work. So he seduced you? Nicole's face crumpled. I didn't know what I was getting into at first. I thought I was just helping Derek with a few small things, nothing major. Adjusting a route here, marking a delivery complete there. But then Vincent started asking for more. Security codes, shipment schedules, warehouse layouts. And when I tried to pull back to say I was done, he threatened me. He showed me pictures of our house, pictures of you leaving for work. How long has this been going on? 8 months. 8 months. The entire time I'd been flagging inventory discrepancies and writing them off as clerical errors, my wife had been systematically robbing my warehouse, my career, my integrity. How much? I asked. Ray, how much have you stolen? She closed her eyes. Vincent's network has taken almost $4 million worth of merchandise across 5 states. Electronics, pharmaceuticals, baby formula. I pulled my hands away from her like I'd been burned. Baby formula? It's one of the most valuable black market items. They sell it overseas to markets where there's shortages. I know what they do with it. My niece Emma flashed through my mind. 11 years old with a medical condition that required specialized formula supplements. 2 months ago, her parents couldn't find her prescription anywhere. Pharmacies across 3 counties were completely out of stock. She'd spent a week sick, vomiting, barely able to keep anything down because the supply chain had failed her. You've been stealing formula from babies. I could barely get the words out. Selling it at inflated prices to desperate parents, while my own niece was sick because she couldn't get her medication. I didn't know about your niece. Ray, please, I never wanted… Get out. What? Get out of this house right now or I call the police. If you call the police, Vincent will know. He has people everywhere. In law enforcement, in the courts, in every logistics company in the region. I don't care. I was shaking. My hands clenched so tight my knuckles were white. Get out. I need to think. She grabbed her purse and her keys. At the door, she turned back one last time. Ray, whatever you decide to do, please be careful. Vincent Torres is not someone you could just turn in and walk away. He doesn't leave loose ends. She left. And I started planning. I didn't call the local police. If Vincent Torres really had people inside law enforcement, going to the cops could get me killed. Or worse, it could tip him off and let the whole network scatter before anyone could be held accountable. Instead, I did what any good warehouse supervisor would do. I started building documentation. The next 72 hours were a blur of coffee, spreadsheets, and phone calls. I barely slept. I barely ate. My motel room looked like a detective's office in a movie. Printouts taped to the walls, highlighters everywhere, notebooks filled with shipping codes and delivery dates and GPS coordinates. Over the next week, I used every contact I had in the logistics industry. Other warehouse supervisors who owed me favors from years of covering shifts and sharing routes. Shipping coordinators I'd worked with during the supply chain crisis 2 years ago. Fleet managers who knew the rhythm of the road better than anyone. I asked careful questions, always casual, never pushing too hard. Hey, you guys been having issues with fast-track drivers lately? Some of my paperwork's not matching up. Or, random question. You know anything about a warehouse manager named Torres over in Overland Park? Heard some rumors. The answers came back piece by piece. A driver who'd been fired for route irregularities. A warehouse in Tulsa that had lost 3 supervisors in 2 years, all sudden departures. A logistics coordinator in Oklahoma City who'd won the lottery and quit her job, except she'd never bought a lottery ticket in her life. I cross-referenced everything, built timelines, drew connections. Slowly, the scope of Vincent's operation emerged from the shadows like a photograph developing in a darkroom. It was massive, way bigger than I'd imagined. And the deeper I dug, the more I realized this wasn't just some local theft ring. This was a professional operation with professional criminals and professional consequences for anyone who got in their way. It was massive. The theft network spanned 5 states: Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Nebraska. Drivers from at least 3 different logistics companies were involved. So were warehouse workers at half a dozen facilities, loading dock supervisors, and logistics coordinators like Nicole. There was even a corrupt official at the State Department of Transportation who could make parking tickets and weigh station violations disappear for the right price. Vincent Torres, officially a warehouse manager at a competing distribution facility in Overland Park, sat at the center of it all, coordinating shipments, paying bribes, and eliminating anyone who threatened to expose him. "You're playing with fire," Jake told me when I finally showed him everything I'd found. We were in his office at Midwest, doors locked, blinds closed, speaking in near whispers even though I'd swept the room twice for bugs. "This isn't a couple of guys skimming boxes off the loading dock. This is organized crime. Real organized crime with real bodies attached. Which is why we need the feds. The FBI cargo theft unit." Jake nodded slowly, drumming his fingers on the desk. "I know a guy. We served together in Afghanistan, Fallujah, back in '05. He's retired now, doing private security consulting, but he still has contacts at the Bureau, people he trusts with his life." "Can we trust him?" I trusted him to pull me out of a burning Humvee with 3 Taliban fighters 50 yards away. He's good people. The real deal. Jake made the call that afternoon. 2 days later, we had a meeting set up with the FBI. 3 days later, I was sitting in a conference room at a nondescript office building in downtown Kansas City, across from Special Agent Denise Porter of the FBI's Cargo Theft Task Force. She was in her late 40s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, with short, gray-streaked hair and a demeanor that reminded me of my drill sergeant from basic training. She had a legal pad in front of her, a digital recorder on the table, and a surveillance photograph of Vincent Torres that looked like it had been taken from a distance with a long lens. She listened without interrupting as I laid out everything. The affair, Nicole's involvement, the evidence I'd gathered from her laptop, the scope of Vincent's operation across 5 states. When I finally finished, she was quiet for a long moment, tapping her pen against the legal pad. "You know most people in your situation would just file for divorce and walk away," she said finally. "Most people don't have a niece who spent a week sick because some lowlife was selling stolen formula on the black market." Agent Porter smiled slightly. "Fair point." She opened a folder. "We've actually been looking at Vincent Torres for about 2 years now. Never could get enough evidence to move on him. His security is tight. He uses burner phones, encrypted communications, multiple intermediaries between himself and the actual theft. And everyone who might flip ends up either dead or too scared to testify. Nicole's scared. Terrified, actually. She thinks Torres has people everywhere. She's not wrong about that. Torres has been smart about building his network. He recruits people who are already vulnerable. Gambling debts, family problems, financial difficulties, and then he owns them. By the time they realize what they're really involved in, they're in too deep to get out. So how do we get him? Agent Porter leaned forward. We catch him in the act. Torres is careful, but he's also paranoid. He doesn't trust anyone to handle the big jobs, the high-value shipments, the complicated logistics. When there's real money on the line, he shows up personally to make sure nothing goes wrong. So we give him a big job. Exactly. She pulled out another folder, this one thicker, filled with photographs and shipping manifests. But it has to be perfect. Torres didn't build a multi-state operation by being stupid. One wrong move, one hint that something's off, and he disappears. We might never get another chance. I looked at the folder, at the years of intelligence gathering it represented. What do you need from me? Your warehouse, your access, your cooperation. She met my eyes. And honestly, we need your wife. I felt my jaw tighten. I'm not sure I can deliver that. I understand your feelings, Mr. Fisher, but Nicole is our best chance at getting Torres to show up in person. She's his inside contact. If she sets up the meeting, tells him there might be a problem, appeals to his paranoia, you want me to convince the woman who's been stealing from my warehouse and sleeping with another man to help the FBI. I want you to give her a choice. Cooperate with us, or spend the next 2 decades in federal prison. Agent Porter's expression was sympathetic but firm. Sometimes the best allies are the ones who don't have any other options. The plan came together over the next 2 weeks. Agent Porter assigned a small team to work with me and Jake. 4 agents, all handpicked, all with spotless backgrounds. We couldn't risk involving local law enforcement or regional FBI offices. Too many potential leaks. The operation would be federal all the way, coordinated from Kansas City but with teams ready to move in 4 other states. The goal was simple: catch Vincent Torres, Derek Hale, and the rest of the network in the act of stealing cargo with enough evidence to guarantee federal conspiracy charges. My role was bait. You control one of the highest value warehouses in the Kansas City hub, Agent Porter explained during our second strategy session. We were in a different location this time, a safe house in Overland Park with bulletproof windows and a panic room. If we can create a shipment attractive enough to draw Torres out personally, we can take down the whole network at once. What kind of shipment? Christmas electronics, high-end tablets, gaming consoles, smart devices. Street value of about $500,000. She slid a folder across the table. We've already coordinated with the manufacturers. The shipment will be real, fully insured, and it'll be tracked with GPS and surveillance from the moment it leaves the factory. Torres won't come out for just any shipment, Jake said. He uses his drivers and warehouse contacts for the regular stuff, stays clean, keeps his distance. The only reason he'd show up personally is if something goes wrong, I finished. If the driver gets cold feet or the inside contact backs out. Agent Porter nodded. Exactly. Torres doesn't trust anyone else to handle problems. His ego won't let him. I knew what I had to do. I didn't like it. The thought of talking to Nicole again made my skin crawl. But I knew. I'll bring Nicole back in. Convincing Nicole to cooperate was easier than I expected. I showed up at her sister's house in Gladstone, where she'd been staying since I threw her out. Her sister Amanda answered the door, gave me a look that could have frozen lava, and grudgingly let me inside. "She's not doing well," Amanda said, her voice low as she led me through the hallway. "She hasn't eaten. She barely sleeps. She's terrified, Ray." "She should be." Amanda stopped and turned to face me. "I'm not defending what she did, but she's still my sister. And whatever happens between you two, she's family to me. I'm not here to hurt her. I'm here to offer her a way out." Amanda studied my face for a long moment, then nodded and gestured toward the living room. "She's in there." Nicole was curled up in the corner of the couch, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm autumn weather, looking like she hadn't slept or eaten properly in days. Her hair was unwashed, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands shaking slightly as she set down a cup of tea that had probably gone cold hours ago. "Ray." Her voice cracked on my name. "I didn't think you'd ever want to see me again." "I don't want to see you." I sat down in the armchair across from her, keeping distance between us. "But I need your help, and you're going to give it to me." "What are you talking about?" I laid out her options, keeping my voice flat and businesslike. "You can either help us take down Torres, or you can go down with him. Federal cargo theft, interstate transportation of stolen goods, conspiracy to commit organized crime. You're looking at 20 years minimum. Maybe more if the prosecutors decide to throw the book at you." She stared at me, her face going even paler. "Us? Who's us?" "The FBI. They've been building a case against Torres for 2 years. I gave them everything I found on your laptop, the emails, the spreadsheets, the photos of my credentials, plus 8 months of shipping data showing the theft patterns." I paused, letting that sink in. "Your name is all over this, Nicole. Every email to VT, every fake delivery confirmation, every rerouted shipment. The only question is whether you go down as a defendant or a cooperating witness." Nicole was shaking now, tears streaming down her face. "He'll kill me, Ray. You don't understand what Vincent is capable of." 2 years ago, a warehouse supervisor in Tulsa figured out what was happening and tried to go to the police. He disappeared. His wife, his kids. They never even found a body. Vincent made him vanish like he never existed. That's why we're not relying on testimony. We're going to catch him in the act, red-handed, on camera, with a warehouse full of FBI agents. He'll be too busy getting arrested to hurt anyone. You don't know him. He has contingency plans. People on payroll waiting for something to go wrong. If this operation fails, it won't fail." I leaned forward, forcing myself to meet her eyes despite everything. "I've spent 11 years in logistics. I know how shipments move, how warehouses work, how drivers think. And I've got federal agents who've been studying Torres for 2 years. We know his patterns. We know his weaknesses. We know his ego won't let him trust anyone else when there's real money on the line." Nicole was quiet for a long moment, hugging her knees to her chest like a child. "Why are you doing this? After what I did to you? You should want me to go to prison." "Part of me does." I was surprised by my own honesty. "But this isn't about you and me anymore. This is about Emma spending a week sick because she couldn't get her formula. About thousands of families getting ripped off by people who think they're too smart to get caught." I stood up. "I'm giving you a chance to fix some of what you broke. Take it or don't, but decide now." She looked up at me, and I saw something shift in her eyes. Fear, yes, but also something that might have been resolution. "What do I have to do?" The next 3 weeks were an exercise in acting. Nicole and I pretended to reconcile. She moved back into the house, into the guest bedroom, while I stayed in the master. To anyone watching, and Torres definitely had people watching, we were a couple working through their problems, putting on a united front. Every morning, I made coffee and we sat at the kitchen table together, talking about nothing important. Weather, sports scores, the neighbor's new dog that wouldn't stop barking. Normal married couple stuff. We even held hands once, walking to the mailbox, because Jake had spotted an unfamiliar car parked down the street with a guy who seemed a little too interested in his phone. "This is torture," Nicole whispered one evening after another performance of domestic harmony. We were in the kitchen, water running to mask our voices. "Every minute I'm in this house, I feel like the walls are closing in." "Try being me," she flinched. "I know I have no right to complain. I know that." "Then don't." "Ray." She reached for my arm, then caught herself. "I know you probably wish I'd never been born. But what happened with Derek? It wasn't because of anything you did. You were a good husband. I got lost. I don't even know who I am anymore." I turned off the water and faced her. "You want the truth? I think you knew exactly who you were. Someone who wanted excitement. Someone who thought the rules didn't apply to her. Someone who figured she was too smart to get caught. And now you're scared because you're finally facing consequences. That's not fair. None of this is fair, but you don't get to play the victim. Not with me." She didn't try talking to me much after that. But the plan was working. Nicole fed Torres's network carefully crafted misinformation through Derek. She told him I'd forgiven her, that I was trying to save the marriage, that I had no idea about the theft operation. Derek, apparently relieved that he wasn't going to get his teeth kicked in, passed everything along to his boss. Meanwhile, the Christmas electronics shipment was confirmed. The delivery date was set for December 18th, peak shipping season, when warehouses were understaffed and security was stretched thin. "Torres is taking the bait," Nicole told me one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. We were in the kitchen, water running in the sink to mask our conversation. "Derek says he wants to supervise this one personally. The shipment's too valuable to leave to the regular crew." "Where's the handoff supposed to happen?" "Your warehouse, loading dock 7, night shift between 2 and 3 a.m. Derek's supposed to pick up the shipment, drive it to a storage facility in Blue Springs, and Torres will meet him there with his own trucks to redistribute the merchandise." But I told Derek there might be a problem, that you've been asking questions about inventory discrepancies, that security might be tighter than usual. She met my eyes. "Torres will come to the warehouse himself to make sure nothing goes wrong. He always does when there's a risk." I nodded. "That's exactly what we need." That night, I called Agent Porter with the details. The trap was set. December 18th arrived with freezing rain and temperatures in the low 20s. Perfect weather for loading dock work. I reported for my shift at 10 p.m., same as always. Acted normal. Chatted with the crew about the Chiefs game, checked manifests, supervised the loading of outgoing shipments. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, so I kept them in my pockets. At midnight, I took my usual break, drinking terrible vending machine coffee in the supervisor's booth, watching the dock floor through frost-edged windows. Agent Porter had given me an earpiece. Tiny, invisible, completely undetectable unless you knew exactly where to look. Every few minutes, her voice crackled in my ear. "All units, status check." Then a cascade of responses. "Unit 2, clear. Unit 5, in position. Sniper team, ready? Sniper team." The words made this feel very, very real. At 1:30 a.m., a text came through on my personal phone. Jake. Package incoming. ETA 20 minutes. I pocketed the phone and walked out onto the dock floor, forcing myself to breathe normally. In my ear, Agent Porter's voice. Fisher, we've got eyes on 3 vehicles approaching from the south. 2 panel vans and 1 SUV. This is it. Hey, Ray. My assistant supervisor, Marcus, looked up from a clipboard. You okay? You seem jumpy tonight. Just the cold. Gets in your bones. I pulled my jacket tighter, hoping he couldn't hear my heart trying to break through my ribs. Listen, I'm going to handle Dock 7 personally tonight. Got a priority shipment coming in. Corporate wants supervisor eyes on it. Need backup? No, I've got it. Keep the crew focused on the outbound stuff. Make sure nothing falls behind schedule. Marcus shrugged and went back to his work. I headed for Dock 7, walking through pools of fluorescent light, past stacks of pallets and forklifts waiting for the next shift. The FBI had agents positioned throughout the warehouse, some disguised as temp workers brought in for the holiday rush, others hidden in offices and storage rooms with clear sightlines to the dock. Local SWAT was staged 2 blocks away, ready to move on Agent Porter's signal. Jake was in the security office, monitoring every camera in the building. At 1:47 a.m., a fast-track logistics truck backed into Dock 7 with a hiss of air brakes. Derek Hale was behind the wheel. He climbed down from the cab, looking around nervously, his breath fogging in the cold air. When he saw me standing by the loading bay, he actually flinched. Ray, didn't expect to see you here. Priority shipment, I said. Corporate wants a supervisor present. Right. Yeah. He wiped his hands on his pants, unable to meet my eyes. Listen, about, what happened with Nicole. I want you to know. Let's just get this done. I never meant to. Derek. I kept my voice flat, dead. I don't care what you meant. I don't care what she told you, what you told yourself to make it okay. You came into my home. You slept with my wife, in my bed. And now you're going to load some boxes onto a truck and drive away, and we're never going to talk about this again. Understand? He nodded rapidly, looking grateful for any escape from this conversation. In my ear, Agent Porter's voice. Fisher, Torres is out of the SUV. He's walking toward the dock. 30 seconds. Before Derek could respond, 3 more vehicles pulled into the loading area. 2 panel vans with magnetic company logos that looked freshly applied, and a black SUV with tinted windows that definitely wasn't standard fleet. I felt my pulse spike as the SUV's door opened and Vincent Torres stepped out. He was smaller than I expected. 5'7", maybe 5'8", with slicked-back hair and an expensive leather jacket that looked completely out of place in a shipping warehouse at 2 in the morning. Gold watch catching the light. Shoes that probably cost more than my car payment. But his eyes, cold, calculating, constantly scanning the environment, those were exactly what I'd imagined. This was a man who noticed everything and trusted nothing. Mr. Fisher. He approached me with an outstretched hand, casual as if we were meeting at a networking event. I've heard a lot about you. I shook his hand. His grip was firm, his palm dry despite the cold. Wish I could say the same. Nicole speaks highly of you. Says you're a man who understands how the world actually works. He glanced around the dock, taking in the cameras, the loading bays, the pallets of merchandise waiting for transport. His eyes lingered on 2 of the temp workers near the forklift. Undercover agents, though he couldn't know that. I appreciate that quality. Too many people in this business think they can succeed by following rules and filling out paperwork. They don't understand that real results require creative solutions. Is that what you call stealing from families? Torres's smile didn't waver. I call it efficiency. These products sitting in a warehouse waiting for holiday discounts, they're losing value by the hour. I simply redirect them to markets where they're properly appreciated. Supply and demand, Mr. Fisher. Basic economics. And the baby formula, the prescription medication. That's economics too? His eyes narrowed slightly. Just a flicker, there and gone. Nicole mentioned you'd been asking questions. I was hoping she was wrong. She was right about a lot of things. For a moment, something dangerous flickered in Torres's expression. Then he smiled again, all warmth and professional charm. We can discuss philosophy another time. Right now, we have a schedule to keep. He checked his watch, the Rolex gleaming under the warehouse lights. Shall we begin? I stepped aside. Load and bay's all yours. Torres snapped his fingers. His men, 6 of them, dressed in warehouse uniforms but moving with military precision, began loading the Christmas electronics shipment from its staging area. They worked fast, professional, clearly experienced at this kind of operation. Derek supervised, directing boxes into the waiting vans with practiced efficiency. I stood back and watched, counted heads, tracked positions, waited for the signal. In my ear, Fisher, we've got all targets on camera, waiting for your signal. I shifted my weight, scratching the back of my neck, the agreed signal that everyone was in position. At 2:23 a.m., my phone buzzed. One word from Jake. Now. The warehouse lights blazed to full brightness. FBI agents emerged from every direction, from behind pallets, from office doorways, from the panel van that had been parked in the corner all night with maintenance painted on the side. The sound of FBI, nobody move, echoed off the metal walls like thunder. Torres's men panicked. 2 of them bolted for the dock doors and were tackled before they got 10 feet, agents slamming them to the concrete, cuffing them while reading them their rights. One guy near the van reached for his waistband, and suddenly half a dozen weapons were pointed at his head. Don't do it! Drop it! Show me your hands! He froze, hands going up slowly, face white as paper. Smart choice. The agent closest to him removed a pistol from his waistband, illegally modified, I'd learn later, with the serial number filed off. Derek Hale just stood there, mouth open, watching his entire world collapse around him. When an agent approached him with handcuffs, he didn't even resist. He just stared at me with this look of complete incomprehension, like a dog that's been kicked and doesn't understand why. You set us up, he said, his voice cracking. You and Nicole. Nicole had a choice, I said. She made the smart one. You made yours a long time ago. But I thought, the marriage, the reconciliation, you thought wrong. An agent led him away, still protesting, still trying to explain. I watched him go and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Vincent Torres didn't run. He didn't panic. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply stood perfectly still, watching the chaos around him with an expression of almost academic interest, like he was observing a case study in crisis management. When Agent Porter herself approached him with handcuffs, he held out his wrists without being asked. Professional to the end. Mr. Fisher, he said as they led him toward a waiting vehicle. His voice carried across the dock, cutting through the shouting and the chaos. I underestimated you. That doesn't happen often. Yeah, I said. It doesn't. For what it's worth, I meant what I said earlier. You are a man who understands how things work. It's a shame you chose the wrong side. There aren't 2 sides. There's stealing from families and there's not. You picked wrong? Torres smiled. An actual smile, like I'd said something amusing. Perhaps. We'll see how you feel about your choices in a few years, when your sense of righteousness has faded and you're still making 40,000 a year loading boxes. He ducked into the back of the sedan, still smiling. I stood there in the freezing rain, watching the convoy of vehicles pull away, sirens wailing, lights flashing. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold anymore. The raids happened simultaneously across 5 states. In Kansas City, Agent Porter's team arrested 14 people, including Torres, Derek, and 4 warehouse workers from Midwest who'd been on his payroll. 2 of them were guys I'd worked with for years. Mike Dennison from the night crew, who always brought donuts on Fridays, and Carmen Reyes from inventory, who'd helped plan my wedding. I'd trusted them. They'd been stealing from me the whole time. In Tulsa, another FBI unit hit Torres's distribution center, catching 11 more suspects and recovering nearly $1 million in stolen merchandise. The warehouse manager there, Torres's right-hand man for the Oklahoma operation, tried to destroy evidence by setting fire to the loading dock. He got third-degree burns on his hands and a federal arson charge for his trouble. Similar operations in Oklahoma City, Little Rock, and Omaha rounded up the rest of the network like a net closing around a school of fish. By sunrise on December 19th, 31 people were in federal custody. The stolen goods, electronics, pharmaceuticals, baby formula, everything, filled 3 separate evidence warehouses. Agents worked around the clock cataloging it all, matching serial numbers to shipping manifests, building the case that would put Torres away for decades. And Nicole was gone. She'd been arrested with the others, per our agreement with the FBI. Hands behind her back, head down, walking to a waiting vehicle without looking back at our house. Her cooperation would earn her a reduced sentence. Agent Porter had pushed hard for leniency given the intelligence she'd provided, but she was still looking at years in federal prison. They'd kept her separated from Torres's people for safety, but that was all the protection she'd get. I signed my witness statement at 7:30 a.m. in an FBI conference room that smelled like stale coffee and printer ink. My hand was cramping by the last page. 41 pages of testimony, dates, names, shipping numbers, everything. You did solid work, Agent Porter told me as I handed over the forms. She looked tired too, running on coffee and adrenaline, but there was satisfaction in her eyes. Without your documentation, we never would have gotten Torres. His lawyers would have tied us up in court for years. What's the total damage? She checked her notes. $3.8 million in confirmed stolen merchandise across the network. Another $2 million we're still tracing through shell companies and offshore accounts, plus fines, penalties, restitution orders. She shook her head. Torres built quite an empire. Too bad for him it all came crashing down. What about the families? The people who couldn't get their medication because of this? We're working with the pharmaceutical companies and insurance providers. Restitution payments, priority shipments to affected areas, the whole 9 yards. She paused. It won't undo the harm, but it's something. Not soon enough. No, but sooner than anyone else managed to make it happen. I nodded and stood to leave. At the door, I turned back. What happens to the Christmas electronics? The toys and tablets and gaming systems we recovered? Agent Porter actually smiled. The first real smile I'd seen from her. The manufacturers agreed to donate them. We're working with local charities to get them distributed before the holiday. About 500 families in the KC area who couldn't afford presents are going to have a much better Christmas morning than they expected. 2 months later, I sat in a federal courtroom and watched Vincent Torres receive his sentence. He walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit, hands cuffed in front of him, flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals. He'd lost weight in custody, and without the expensive clothes and the gold watch, he looked smaller somehow. Ordinary. Like any other middle-aged guy who'd made bad choices. But those eyes were the same. Cold. Calculating. Still scanning the courtroom for angles. The prosecution laid out the case methodically. 8 months of theft. Multi-state operation. 31 co-conspirators. Nearly $4 million in stolen merchandise. Witness intimidation. Evidence tampering. 18 years, the judge pronounced. Wire fraud, cargo theft, conspiracy to commit organized crime, racketeering, money laundering, plus 3 additional years for threatening witnesses and attempting to destroy evidence. 21 years total. Torres would be in his 70s before he saw freedom again. As they let him out, he looked back at me one last time. No smile, just a cold stare that said this isn't finished. Then he was gone. Derek Hale got 7 years. His lawyer argued gambling addiction, financial desperation, manipulation by Torres. The judge wasn't moved. You made choices, Mr. Hale. 7 years to reflect on them. Nicole's sentencing was the following week. Harder to watch than I'd expected. She stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back, her face pale and thin. She'd lost at least 15 pounds in custody. She looked like a photograph of someone I used to know. Mrs. Fisher, the judge said, peering over his glasses, your cooperation with federal authorities is noted and appreciated. The intelligence you provided was instrumental in dismantling a criminal enterprise that caused substantial harm to businesses and families across 5 states. Nicole kept her eyes forward. Didn't look at me. I wasn't sure I wanted her to. However, the judge continued, the scope of your involvement in this operation, including the exploitation of your husband's employment credentials and your intimate relationship with another co-conspirator, cannot be overlooked. You had multiple opportunities to come forward, and you chose instead to continue participating in criminal activity. You are hereby sentenced to 42 months in federal custody, followed by 3 years of supervised release. She was led away without a backward glance. I watched her go. This woman I'd shared 8 years of my life with, who'd betrayed me in every way possible, and felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even relief, just emptiness. I filed for divorce the next week. The proceedings were straightforward. No kids, no real assets to fight over after the emergency fund and her legal fees, no desire to drag things out. I just wanted it over. The judge granted the divorce in March, citing irreconcilable differences. Clean, clinical, final. That same month, I got a phone call that changed my life again, this time for the better. Federal Cargo Security Consultant, Agent Porter said. We were sitting in a coffee shop near the federal building, a far cry from the sterile conference rooms where we'd planned the takedown. It's a contract position, technically. You'd work with the FBI, Homeland Security, and private logistics companies to identify vulnerabilities before criminals can exploit them. I stirred my coffee. I load boxes for a living. You dismantled a 5-state criminal network using shipping manifests and GPS data. The cargo theft unit needs people who actually understand how the industry works, not just agents who learned about logistics from a PowerPoint presentation. She pushed a business card across the table. Better pay than your current salary, flexible hours, and you'd actually be preventing theft instead of just cleaning up after it. I thought about Emma, about the weeks she'd been sick, about all the other families who'd been victimized by people like Torres while the system was too slow to catch them. When do I start? 6 months after the arrests, I was at my sister's place for Sunday dinner. Emma was doing better, more than better, actually. The pharmaceutical companies, embarrassed by the theft revelations and the resulting negative press, had implemented new supply chain protections and made sure her medication was always in stock. No more shortages, no more panicked calls to pharmacies across 3 counties. "Uncle Ray," she came barreling into the living room like a small hurricane while I was helping set the table. "Mom says you catch bad guys now." Something like that. Like in the movies? More like in a really boring movie about spreadsheets and shipping containers. She wrinkled her nose. That sounds really boring. It is, but sometimes boring work catches bad people. Did you catch the people who made me sick? The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I crouched down to her level. Yeah, honey, I did. They're in prison now. They can't hurt anyone anymore. Good. She said it with the simple certainty that only kids have. They were mean. They were. Very mean. My sister Jennifer came in from the kitchen with a casserole dish that smelled amazing. Don't let him fool you, Emma. Your uncle helped put away a bunch of criminals who were stealing medicine from families. Really? Really? He's basically a superhero now. I review inventory reports, I protested. That's not exactly superhero material. You saved Christmas for hundreds of families. Those toys and electronics that got distributed? 300 families in Kansas City alone got presents because of what you did. Jennifer set the dish down and fixed me with a look. Take the compliment, Ray. You earned it. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just started folding napkins. After dinner, while Jennifer was doing dishes and Emma was watching cartoons, my brother-in-law Mike cornered me on the back porch. You doing okay? He asked, handing me a beer. I mean really okay, not just say you're fine so people stop asking okay. I took a sip. Some days are harder than others, but yeah, I'm doing okay. You hear anything from Nicole? Her lawyer sent divorce papers 3 weeks ago. I signed them and sent them back. That's the last communication we'll ever have. Mike nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I never liked her. I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. You could have mentioned that 8 years ago. Would you have listened? Probably not. That's what I figured. He clinked his bottle against mine. Here's to new beginnings. Later, Emma dragged me outside to show me how she'd learned to ride her bike without training wheels. I stood in the driveway watching her wobble up and down the sidewalk, occasionally catching her when she tilted too far. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. Saw your name in the trade publication article about the Torres case. Impressive work. Coffee sometime? Sarah K. I stared at the message for a moment. Sarah Kimball, the federal prosecutor who'd handled Torres's sentencing. We'd crossed paths a few times during the trial. Smart, sharp, actually seemed to enjoy her job even when it meant dealing with criminals and bureaucracy. I typed back, sure, name the time and place. Friday, 7 p.m. There's a wine bar in the Crossroads district that just opened. You interested? See you there. Emma crashed her bike into the recycling bins and immediately announced she was fine. I pocketed my phone and went to help her up. A year after the sentencing, I stood in front of a conference room full of warehouse supervisors, security directors, and logistics coordinators. The company had brought me in to do a presentation on cargo security, my specialty now, apparently. The slide behind me showed a map of the Torres network. All those connections I'd mapped out during sleepless nights in a motel room off I-70. The biggest vulnerability in any shipping operation isn't technology, I said. It's not cameras or GPS trackers or alarm systems. You can have the most sophisticated security infrastructure in the world, and it won't matter if your people aren't paying attention. I clicked to the next slide. $3.8 million. That's what Torres's network stole in less than 2 years. And they did it by exploiting the same weakness every time. People who didn't ask questions when the numbers looked wrong. I clicked again. An employee with money problems who saw an opportunity. Supervisors who flagged discrepancies but never followed up. Coordinators who assumed someone else would handle the problem. Every single person in that network thought they were just doing a small thing. A little deviation here, a minor irregularity there. Nobody wanted to believe they were part of something bigger. I looked around the room. Your job isn't to catch criminals. That's what law enforcement is for. Your job is to make sure discrepancies get noticed, get documented, and get escalated. If something doesn't add up, say something. If a route looks wrong, flag it. If an employee's behavior changes suddenly, pay attention. I closed my laptop. Questions? A hand went up near the back. A young woman, maybe 25, with an earnest expression. Mr. Fisher, what happened to your wife? The room got very quiet. She served her time, I said after a moment. Got out about 2 months ago. Last I heard, she was living with family somewhere in Colorado, staying clean, trying to start over. I paused. People make choices. Sometimes those choices lead to prison. Sometimes they lead somewhere else. Either way, there are consequences. The session ended 20 minutes later. As the attendees filed out, I packed up my laptop and headed for the parking garage. Sarah was waiting by my car, 2 cups of coffee in her hands. How'd it go? Good, I think. Nobody fell asleep anyway. I took one of the cups. You didn't have to come all the way down here? I had a meeting downtown anyway. Besides, she smiled, I wanted to remind you we have dinner reservations tonight. I remember. Good. Because I made them 3 weeks ago and the cancellation fee is absurd. We walked to our cars together, Sarah's heels clicking on the concrete, the late afternoon sun slanting through the garage windows. Ray, she said, pausing at her vehicle. I know you don't like talking about this, but are you okay with all of it? The anniversary of the arrest is coming up, and I know that can bring things back. I thought about it for a moment. The past year, the divorce, the trial, the sleepless nights in that motel room, the morning I walked in on Nicole and Derek, the terror in her eyes when she told me about Torres. Yeah, I said finally. I'm okay. And the thing was, I meant it. 3 years later, I was in my home office reviewing security assessments when the phone rang. Mr. Fisher, this is Agent Rodriguez with the Atlanta field office. We've got a situation down here that looks familiar. Organized theft network targeting pharmaceutical shipments. Multi-state operation. My supervisor said you might be able to help. I pulled up a fresh document on my laptop. Tell me what you've got. 6 months of inventory discrepancies at 3 different distribution centers. All the losses correlate with route deviations by the same logistics company. We've got GPS data that doesn't match delivery confirmations, and at least 2 employees who suddenly started paying off debts they shouldn't have been able to afford. Sounds familiar? That's what we thought. My supervisor worked with Agent Porter on the Torres case back in the day. She said if anyone could help us connect the dots, it was you. I smiled despite myself. Send me everything you've got. Shipping manifests, GPS logs, delivery confirmations, employee records. I'll review it tonight and we can talk tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. We appreciate the help. I hung up and started reading. New case, new players, new cities. But the same patterns. Discrepancies that didn't make sense. Routes that didn't match schedules. Somewhere out there, someone was stealing from families again. I picked up the phone. Agent Rodriguez, let's get started. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.